All right, we are going to take a quick, in-depth, more technical-based look at the Mach-e prototype that was just released last week at the 2025 Ford Performance Season Launch Party. They are referring to this as the Mustang Mach-e Demonstrator Nascar prototype, and specifically designed for the Cup Series based on the next-gen chassis. So I'm going to start just by going through pictures, and bear with me. This is obviously a picture of the vehicle while it was still undercover before it was unveiled. You can see clearly that the body lines are very similar to the production model Mach-e, at least when it's under the cover. You can identify quickly and easily that squoval front shape. You can see that the front wheel wells and those fender flare type of things carry a strong resemblance to what we see in the Mustang Mach-e that is in production. So that was my first indicator. Now, when you go to the unveiled photo, you'll notice that there are some drastic differences. I think the first thing I noticed when I look at this unveiled version is that, first of all, it is a two-door coupe. So we are no longer looking at the four-door saloon, if you will. We are looking at a two-door coupe. It still maintains the overall hatch shape. So that's one of the things that when you look at the back end of it, you can see it still has a hatch. It very much carries similar body lines to the production model Mach-e, but it is also drastically different. It is so hard to see past this giant wing on the back. And it's really interesting to me because they put this giant wing on there while also making other design and aero changes that were focused on maintaining the compliance with next-gen Cup Series requirements. So technical specs for next-gen, if I'm not mistaken, require that there is an entire underbody tray that includes and encompasses part of this front splitter, and the whole unit runs through to the rear diffuser. So looking back at this photo here, we can see that the back of this prototype Mach-e has this specific diffuser. Again, full carbon, and it is integrated into the rest of the vehicle. My assumption is that this had to do with downforce, and they had to do something to keep the car on the ground, especially with cornering, especially being a hatch. So let's also talk about that piece. As Ford moves through the EV market, you guys have probably seen the super truck that they did that's based on a Lightning platform. And then they also have the super van, the Cobra Jet 1800. So there's a lot of things that Ford is doing in the EV market. And obviously with the Cobra Jet, they have found a way to keep a non-hatch body style, but make it into a race car. They intentionally did not do that with this vehicle. So one of the things that was revealed in another interview that someone had with one of the engineers is that the height of the body itself on this particular Mach-e is taller than what most next-gen cars are. And that had to do with a couple of things. First of all, it had to do with the driver height and driver comfort in the vehicle. And second of all, it had to do with the battery. So there is a 78 kilowatt hour battery that is stored in this vehicle that powers it. And it is located along the driver's right. So it would be the passenger side of the vehicle is where that battery is located. Now, charging is done externally. It's done through the window, and it's an indirect DC charge. So all the charging components are off vehicle. Again, that's going to help with the weight reduction, which this particular unit, this prototype, is about 1,000 pounds lighter than production model Mach-e GT, production model Mach-e Rally. But one of the other things that they did was they also used as much carbon as they could. So the entire tub of this vehicle is carbon, and it's built on the next-gen S650 Dark Horse chassis. All right, coming back to this, we can take a closer look at some of the similarities and differences between this prototype and other next-gen vehicles that are currently racing. So you can see that they've obviously borrowed some components. So we have the same wheels, the same tires, the suspension is the same. It's a four-corner adjustable coilover setup. So that's shared with the next-gen, stipulated by Nascar. Again, underbody tray. Suspension, the steering is also the same. So it has that multi-link steering, and then it also has the independent rear suspension. So we're seeing some similarities and some crossovers. However, one of the interesting things that I heard from one of the engineers I was speaking with was that this vehicle has a drastically different drivetrain than what we see in other next-gen cars. So switching over to this comparison chart that I made, it's just quick and it's just information that I could either find or had heard. We can look at some of the similarities and differences. You'll notice that in this particular chart, I have included the 2020 Mach-e 1400 that was developed in conjunction with Ford Performance and RTR. Again, intended to be used for drift and short track, oval track, that sort of thing. So not large scale racing like what we're seeing as the intended use for the Nascar prototype. But going back to this, I want to start with the drivetrain. That's where I was at. So drivetrain wise, this particular prototype has an active all-wheel drive system of some sort. I didn't get a lot of intense, like specific details about that all-wheel drive system, but it did sound very similar in theory to what had been done on the previous RTR vehicle. And that's going to lead me to my next thing, which is the difference in horsepower. So the estimated horsepower as listed on the Ford website for this prototype is 1360 for their qualifying mode, and then it's estimated to be 816 for race mode. So again, I would imagine this is very similar to how we see the power level play out in the production model Mach-e. We have about 480 horsepower and we have about 700 foot-pounds of torque with that performance upgrade or in the rally edition. So in those models that are in production, we have unbridled, which is like our, all-out race mode, or we have unbridled extended, which is intended for longer term use. It keeps better temperature of the battery, and it basically preserves your power and distributes it in a way that you're going to get more out of it for longer. So my assumption would be that the difference between qualifying and race in this prototype is a very similar concept. If we look at the battery size and the battery capacity, if you will, for the two models comparatively, we notice a huge difference. So again, production model, we're at a 91 kilowatt hour battery. When we look at the battery that's in this prototype, it's only a 78 kilowatt hour battery. Presumably, they're making this switch, first of all, for weight and size savings, but also because they know exactly what the intended use is. Same is true for that 2020 Mach-e 1400 that was developed with RTR. That is a 56.8 kilowatt hour battery, although it has 7 motors attached to it. And that's going to be our next thing. Let's talk about the number of motors. I think this is huge. I think the fact that they were able to get a whole 1,360 potential horsepower out of 3 motors is amazing. So we're looking at the production model has 2 motors. We're at 480 horsepower. When we look at the RTR version that was made in 2020, we noticed that it has a whopping 7 motors. 3 of those were used to power the front axle and 4 of them were used to power the rear axle. That's a huge difference. We have 7 motors being powered by a whole 56 kilowatt hour battery, and it's producing still 1,400 horsepower. We see a very similar horsepower potential rating coming with only 3 motors being used. A lot of this has to do with who was working on the project. Again, you'll see here, who are we collaborating with? This prototype was made in collaboration with Stard of Austria, who has been working with Ford and collaborating with Ford since at least 2020, maybe 2018. I cannot recall the exact date. Stard has been in the performance EV game for a long time. They've been really good at what they do. They've worked well with Ford in the past, creating their Fiesta Rally EV. There's all kinds of cool history there. But the point is, a lot of this has to do, I think, with battery technology and development and advancement and what we can do with these batteries and the motors themselves. Again, the intent and the use and the purpose of why these are built makes a huge difference in what the outcome is. And we also see a huge difference being made by what chassis we're using. So the Mach-e 1400 that was developed with RTR, that used a production model chassis. The new prototype that was just released uses a full carbon tub on that S650 Dark Horse next gen chassis. The chassis has been modified, obviously, but again, using that as the base provides a very different end result. In any case, Very interesting. Ford is definitely pushing the EV market. It's going to be really cool to see what they come up with as time goes on. We know that other manufacturers are in the works of doing this. We know that they are looking to expand the market and expand the opportunity to run these vehicles in competition and to have the same opportunity as they have with their internal combustion V8 pushrod engines. And we are so fortunate that Ford is going to keep going with what they've already started. Hope this helps, and I hope that you get something from this. I've tried to keep it as concise as possible. I've tried to share my photos. If you guys have any questions, please let me know. I'll do my best to answer or find the answer for you.